The dust of Sweetwater Springs billowed beneath the wheels of the stagecoach as Rosalie Greenwood clutched her embroidered handkerchief over her nose, struggling to maintain her composure. The year was 1876, and she had never felt so utterly displaced in her 22 years of pampered existence. "We'll be arriving shortly, Miss Greenwood," the driver called back, his voice nearly lost in the rumble of wooden wheels against the hard-packed dirt road. Rosalie straightened her spine, feeling the whalebone corset dig into her ribs beneath the expensive silk traveling dress. The rolling hills of Texas stretched endlessly before her, so different from the manicured gardens and cobblestone streets of Boston. Her father's letter had been brief but insistent. He had purchased the Double G Ranch outside Sweetwater Springs as an investment, and now, with rumors of troubles, he was sending his only daughter to oversee matters until they could be properly resolved. "You have a head for business, Rosie," he had said before her departure, "and some fresh air will do you good after that broken engagement." She closed her eyes, blocking out the memory of Charles Winthrop III and his scandalous affair with her former best friend. The humiliation still stung, but perhaps her father was right. Perhaps this frontier town would provide the distraction she needed. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of a dusty building with a hand-painted sign that read, "Sweetwater Springs Hotel." Rosalie peered through the window, her heart sinking at the sight of the crude wooden structures that lined the town's main street. A far cry from the marble facades and wrought-iron balconies of Boston's Beacon Hill. "Miss Greenwood," a weathered man in a black suit approached as the driver helped her down. "I'm Mayor Thompson. We've been expecting you. Your father sent word of your arrival." Rosalie offered a tight smile in her gloved hand. "A pleasure, Mayor. I trust the accommodations at the hotel will be suitable until I can properly assess the situation at the Double G." The mayor's expression flickered with something amusement, concern, before he nodded. "The hotel's the finest establishment in 3 counties, Miss Greenwood. Mrs. Miller keeps a clean house." "I shall require transportation to the ranch tomorrow morning," Rosalie continued, watching as the driver unloaded her trunks. "And I would appreciate a meeting with the current foreman." "About that, Miss Greenwood," the mayor cleared his throat. "The previous foreman quit 2 weeks ago, took half the hands with him. But Quinn Prescott's been keeping things running. He's a good man, best cowhand in the territory. Knows that land better than anyone." "Then I shall meet with Mr. Prescott first thing tomorrow." Rosalie lifted her chin, ignoring the curious stares from locals gathering on the wooden sidewalk. "For now, I require rest and refreshment." As Rosalie was shown to her room, small but mercifully clean, she fought down a wave of homesickness. What did she know of cattle and ranching? Her education at Miss Porter's School for Young Ladies had prepared her for running a household and navigating Boston social circles, not managing a frontier ranch. But she was Henry Greenwood's daughter, and Greenwoods did not admit defeat. Dawn broke in a blaze of colors Rosalie had never witnessed in Massachusetts. She dressed in her simplest day dress, though simple by Boston standards, was still elaborate by Sweetwater Springs measure, and arranged for a wagon to take her to the Double G. The ranch house came into view after an hour's journey, a modest 2-story structure with a wide porch and corrals stretching behind it. Men on horseback moved in the distance, tiny figures against the vastness of the land. As the wagon pulled up to the house, Rosalie noticed a tall figure emerging from the barn, wiping his hands on a bandana. "That'd be Quinn," the driver informed her. "Man can gentle a horse that's never been ridden and shoot the eye out of a hawk at 100 paces. Rosalie stepped down from the wagon without assistance, determined to project capability. The man approached, and Rosalie felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. Quinn Prescott was tall, broad-shouldered, and sun-bronzed. His eyes, as blue as the Texas sky above them, assessed her with open curiosity. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle from actual labor, not the kind performed for sport at university clubs like the men she knew back home. "Miss Greenwood," he said, his voice deep and pleasant, though lacking the refined accent she was accustomed to. "Welcome to the Double G." "Mr. Prescott," she replied, extending her hand formally. I understand you've been managing in the absence of a proper foreman. A smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. Don't know about proper, madam, but I've been keeping the cattle alive and the fences mended. I shall require a complete inventory and accounting, Rosalie said, withdrawing her hand from his calloused grip. My father expects a full report. Quinn nodded slowly. Yes, madam. I can show you the books after you've had a chance to settle in. Martha's got the house ready for you. She's been cooking and keeping house here since your father bought the place. Excellent, and I will need a tour of the property at your earliest convenience. We can start this afternoon, if you'd like. He gestured toward the house, but you might want to change into something more practical. Rosalie stiffened. I assure you, Mr. Prescott, I am perfectly capable of managing an appropriate attire. That half-smile again. No doubt, Miss Greenwood. But the Double G covers 15,000 acres, and not all of it's as smooth as a dance floor. Before she could reply, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. Miss Greenwood, I'm Martha Wilkins. Come in, come in. I've got fresh coffee and biscuits waiting. You must be exhausted after your journey. Rosalie allowed herself to be ushered inside, aware of Quinn Prescott's eyes on her back. The house was surprisingly comfortable, with solid furniture and clean surfaces, though lacking the ornate touches of her Boston home. Your room's upstairs, miss, Martha said, leading the way. It's not fancy, but the bed's soft and the windows catch a nice breeze. Thank you, Mrs. Wilkins. Rosalie surveyed the simply furnished bedroom with its iron bedstead and patchwork quilt. This will be adequate. After refreshing herself, Rosalie descended to find Quinn waiting in what passed for a study, a small room with a desk covered in ledgers and maps. Mr. Prescott, I'm ready to review the accounts. He nodded and pulled out a chair for her. It's not complicated, Miss Greenwood. We run about 2,000 head of cattle, employ 8 full-time hands, and contract extra help during roundup and branding. For the next hour, Rosalie immersed herself in the ranch's finances, surprised to find everything meticulously documented. Quinn answered her questions patiently, explaining terms she didn't understand without condescension. These figures for feed seem high, she noted, running her finger along a column of numbers. Drought last summer, Quinn explained. Had to supplement grazing with feed we brought in from up north. Cost more, but we saved the herd. And these men who left with the previous foreman, why? Quinn's expression darkened slightly. Jackson wasn't honest with your father about some things, water rights primarily. When I confronted him, he took off convinced some of the boys the ranch was failing. Is it? Rosalie asked directly, meeting his gaze. No, madam, the Double G's solid. Good water, good grazing. Just needs steady management and hard work. Rosalie considered this. My father mentioned rumors of trouble. There's always trouble in cattle country, Quinn replied. Rustlers, land disputes, nature herself. But nothing we can't handle. We? Rosalie raised an eyebrow. Figure of speech, Miss Greenwood, but his eyes held hers a moment longer than necessary. Now, about that tour, Martha's packed us some food. If you're amenable, we could head out after you change. Rosalie glanced down at her dress, then back at Quinn. I don't suppose you have any suggestions for what might be practical attire. To her surprise, he grinned. As a matter of fact, I took the liberty of having Martha set aside some things. Previous owner's daughter left them behind. Might be more suitable for riding. An hour later, Rosalie emerged from her room feeling scandalously underdressed in a divided riding skirt and simple blouse. Her hair was pulled back in a practical knot rather than the elaborate style she typically wore. Quinn waited by the corral, holding the reins of 2 horses. He looked up as she approached, and something flickered in his eyes that made her heart skip oddly. You look right at home already, Miss Greenwood. I assure you, Mr. Prescott, I feel anything but. She approached the smaller horse, a chestnut mare with intelligent eyes. I haven't ridden since I was a girl and never astride. Clementine's gentle as they come, Quinn assured her, and riding astride is safer out here. With as much dignity as she could muster, Rosalie allowed Quinn to help her mount. The sensation of sitting astride was strange, the divided skirt bunching awkwardly. "Relax your posture," Quinn suggested, adjusting her stirrups. "Let your body move with the horse." He mounted his own horse, a powerful buckskin gelding, with effortless grace. "We'll start with the main pastures and work our way out to the creek. That's where most of our water comes from." The afternoon passed in a blur of new experiences. Quinn pointed out landmarks, explained grazing patterns, and introduced her to the handful of ranch hands they encountered. Rosalie's thighs ached from the unaccustomed position, but she refused to complain. They stopped to rest near a creek where cottonwood trees provided welcome shade. Quinn spread a blanket on the grass and unpacked the food Martha had prepared. "You're doing well," he observed, handing her a tin cup of water. "Most city folks would have been begging to turn back hours ago." "Greenwoods aren't quitters, Mr. Prescott." Rosalie took a sip, suddenly aware of her parched throat and rumbling stomach. "Quinn," he corrected. "Out here. Folks use first names." "That hardly seems proper." "Not much about Texas is proper by Boston standards, I reckon." He unwrapped bread, cheese, and sliced ham. "But there's a freedom in that." Rosalie accepted the food, conscious of her growling stomach. Freedom from propriety can lead to chaos. "Or it can let a person discover who they really are," Quinn countered, stretching his long legs out before him. "When there's no one watching, judging every move according to rules that don't make much sense out here." "The rules of society exist for good reason, Mr. Quinn." The name felt intimate on her lips. "Do they?" His blue eyes studied her face. "Did they protect you from whatever sent you running to Texas?" Rosalie stiffened. "I'm not running from anything. I'm here on my father's business." Quinn nodded, though his expression suggested he didn't quite believe her. "Well, whatever brought you here, the Double G could use someone with your sharp eye for numbers." The conversation shifted to safer topics, the coming cattle drive to the railhead, plans for expanding the herd, the neighboring ranchers. As they remounted to continue the tour, Rosalie found herself growing more comfortable both on horseback and in Quinn's company. By the time they returned to the ranch house, the sun was setting in spectacular fashion, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple Rosalie had never seen in the east. "It's beautiful," she murmured, pausing before dismounting. "Worth the saddle sores?" Quinn asked, a teasing light in his eyes. "I don't have—" Rosalie began indignantly, then stopped as she shifted in the saddle and felt the tender spots that would undoubtedly be painful tomorrow. "Perhaps I do," Quinn laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "You'll toughen up. Takes time is all." "I'm not certain I'll be here long enough for that," Rosalie replied as he helped her dismount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a brief moment, they stood close enough that she could smell the leather and clean sweat, and something indefinably masculine that clung to him. Then she stepped back, smoothing her riding skirt. "Thank you for the tour, Quinn. It was most informative." "My pleasure, Rosalie." The sound of her name in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. "Same time tomorrow? There's still plenty to see." She nodded, suddenly unable to trust her voice. As she made her way to the house, she was acutely aware of his gaze following her, and even more aware of her own inexplicable desire to look back. Over the next 2 weeks, Rosalie fell into a routine that would have scandalized her Boston acquaintances. She rose with the sun, dressed in the practical clothing she'd acquired, and spent her mornings reviewing the ranch's books and correspondence. Afternoons were devoted to exploring the property with Quinn, learning about cattle breeding, water management, and the intricacies of running a successful operation. To her surprise, she found herself enjoying the work. There was satisfaction in understanding the business from the ground up, and seeing how each decision affected the whole. Quinn proved to be a patient teacher, never talking down to her or dismissing her questions. "You've got a natural eye for this," he told her one afternoon, as they inspected a section of fence that needed repair. "Most folks just see cows and grass. You see the connections, how the grass needs the right grazing pressure to stay healthy, how the cattle need movement to thrive. My father always said understanding systems is the key to success in any business," Rosalie replied, oddly pleased by his praise. Though I admit, I never expected to apply those lessons to ranching. What did you expect to be doing with your life? Quinn asked, hammering a staple to secure a strand of wire to a post. Rosalie considered the question. I was engaged to be married, she said finally. I expected to be planning a wedding and preparing to manage a household in Boston's Back Bay. Quinn paused in his work. He found someone he preferred. The admission still stung, though less sharply than before. It was quite the scandal. Quinn's expression darkened. Man's a fool. Perhaps? Rosalie shrugged, aiming for nonchalance. In any case, my father thought sending me here would give the gossip time to die down. Is that all Texas is to you? A hiding place until you can return to proper society? The question caught her off guard. I don't know, she answered honestly. When I arrived, yes, but now. Quinn waited, his eyes intent on her face. Now I'm not certain, she finished. There's something compelling about this place. He smiled then, a slow smile that transformed his weathered features. Gets under your skin, doesn't it? The openness, the honesty of it. Yes, Rosalie agreed. Though I miss certain comforts. Like what? Hot baths whenever I please. Libraries, concert halls. We've got music, Quinn protested. Saturday nights at the Silver Spur, there's always a fiddle player. I can hardly imagine that compares to the Boston Symphony Orchestra, Rosalie said dryly. Probably not, Quinn admitted, but I'd wager it's more fun. Come to town with me Saturday? Judge for yourself? The invitation hung between them, weighted with possibilities Rosalie wasn't ready to consider. I should write to my father with an update on the ranch's status. Disappointment flashed across Quinn's face before he nodded. Of course. Another time, perhaps. They worked in companionable silence until the fence was mended, then rode back to the ranch house as the afternoon heat began to build. Rosalie found herself stealing glances at Quinn's profile, noting the strong line of his jaw, the way the sun had burnished his skin to bronze. That evening, as she sat at the desk in her room composing a letter to her father, Rosalie found it difficult to focus. Her report on the ranch's operations was factual and precise, but she struggled to articulate her own experiences. How could she explain that she'd developed calluses on her hands and didn't mind? That the simplicity of ranch life was beginning to appeal to her in ways she hadn't anticipated? And how could she possibly explain Quinn Prescott, a man so different from the polished gentleman of her social circle, yet more genuine than any of them? In the end, she wrote only that the ranch was in capable hands, and that she was learning a great deal about the cattle business. She made no mention of blue eyes that seemed to see through her carefully constructed facade, or of hands that worked magic with horses, and made her wonder how they might feel against her skin. Saturday arrived with a brilliance that seemed to mirror Rosalie's unexpectedly buoyant mood. She found herself humming as she dressed for the day, choosing a riding skirt and blouse that flattered her figure more than her other practical attire. When she entered the kitchen, Martha gave her a knowing look. Heard Quinn's taking you into town today. I never agreed to, Rosalie began. He's already hitched up the buggy, Martha continued, placing a plate of eggs and biscuits before her. Said something about showing you there's culture even in Sweetwater Springs. That's presumptuous of him, Rosalie said, though she couldn't muster any genuine indignation. Martha chuckled. That boy's been sweet on you since you stepped down from that wagon. Never seen him take such care showing anyone the ranch before. Rosalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. He's simply being thorough in his duties. If you say so, Miss Rosalie. Martha turned back to the stove, but not before Rosalie caught her amused expression. Quinn appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. He'd traded his work clothes for clean trousers, a pressed shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. His dark hair was damp from washing, curling slightly at his collar. Morning, ladies, he greeted them. Beautiful day for a trip to town, wouldn't you say? I don't recall agreeing to accompany you, Mr. Prescott, Rosalie said, though her heart wasn't in the protest. Quinn, he corrected automatically, "and I figured you might change your mind after thinking it over. The mercantile just got in a shipment of books from back east." Rosalie hesitated. "Books?" He nodded, eyes twinkling. "Mrs. Wilson at the mercantile orders them special, has a whole shelf dedicated to literature." "I suppose it would be sensible to see more of the town," Rosalie conceded, ignoring Martha's quiet snort of amusement. An hour later, they were traveling the road to Sweetwater Springs in the ranch's buggy, a more comfortable conveyance than horseback. Quinn handled the reins with easy competence, pointing out features of the landscape as they went. "See that ridge there? Local legend says a Spanish conquistador buried a chest of gold somewhere along it back in the 1500s. Folks still go looking for it from time to time." "Have you?" Rosalie asked. Quinn chuckled. "Once or twice when I first came to these parts. Realized pretty quick that the real treasure in Texas is the land itself, if you know how to work it right." "How did you come to be at the Double G?" Rosalie had wondered about his background, but hadn't found the right moment to ask. "Worked my way up," he replied. "Started as a ranch hand when I was 16. Learned everything I could. Your father hired me 3 years ago when he bought the place. I was working as second foreman at the Circle M by then." "You seem young to have acquired so much experience," Rosalie observed. Quinn shrugged. "I'm 28. Been working cattle half my life. My pa died when I was 15, left my ma and sisters with nothing but debts. I had to grow up fast." "I'm sorry," Rosalie said softly. "That must have been difficult." "Life's difficult," Quinn replied without self-pity. "But it's also good, if you look for the goodness." The simplicity of his philosophy struck her. In Boston, her social set was forever chasing the next diversion, the next status symbol, never quite satisfied with what they had. Quinn seemed to possess a contentment that eluded them all. Sweetwater Springs was bustling with Saturday activity when they arrived. Wagons and horses lined the main street, and the sidewalks were filled with people conducting their weekly business. "I'll take you to the mercantile first," Quinn said, helping her down from the buggy. "Then maybe lunch at the hotel? They do a decent meal on Saturdays." Rosalie nodded, suddenly conscious of the curious glances directed their way. "Do I look terribly out of place?" Quinn smiled down at her. "You look beautiful." The compliment, delivered with such straightforward sincerity, left her momentarily speechless. Before she could formulate a response, Quinn offered his arm. "Shall we?" The mercantile was a revelation. While not as grand as the department stores of Boston, it offered an impressive array of goods, from practical necessities to unexpected luxuries. Mrs. Wilson, the proprietress, greeted Quinn warmly before turning her attention to Rosalie. "Miss Greenwood, what a pleasure to finally meet you. We've all been curious about the lady from Boston who's taking charge at the Double G." "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Wilson," Rosalie replied, wondering exactly what kind of gossip had been circulating. "Quinn mentioned you might be interested in our book selection," Mrs. Wilson continued, leading them to a corner of the store where several shelves held neatly arranged volumes. "We just got in some new titles from Philadelphia." Rosalie browsed the selection with genuine interest, eventually selecting 2 novels and a volume of poetry. As she reached for her purse, Quinn stepped forward. "Allow me," he said quietly. "That's not necessary," Rosalie protested. "I invited you to town," Quinn countered. "Besides, it's a gift. To welcome you properly to Texas." Rosalie hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you. That's very kind." Mrs. Wilson wrapped the books in brown paper, her eyes twinkling as she glanced between them. "Quinn's always been a gentleman. One of the few around these parts who appreciates the finer things." After the mercantile, they visited the other establishments in town, the bank, the post office, the small church. Rosalie mailed her letter to her father and purchased a few items for herself at the dressmaker's shop, including a ready-made dress in a practical cotton that would suit ranch life better than her Boston finery. Lunch at the hotel dining room was simple but satisfying. Quinn was clearly well respected in the community. Numerous people stopped by their table to exchange greetings and be introduced to Rosalie. "Everyone seems to know you," she observed after an elderly rancher named Jenkins departed with a wink and a cryptic comment about catching the right filly. Quinn's ears reddened slightly. Small town. Everyone knows everyone's business. And what business do they think we're conducting? Rosalie asked, suddenly understanding the looks they'd been receiving. People talk, Quinn said, meeting her eyes directly. But I don't pay much mind to gossip. Perhaps I should, Rosalie replied. After all, it was gossip that drove me from Boston. What happened? Quinn asked. If you don't mind my asking. Rosalie took a sip of her tea, considering how much to reveal. My fiancé was caught in a compromising position with my friend Vivian, at a party in my parents' home, no less. Quinn's expression darkened. Like I said, man's a fool. I thought I loved him, Rosalie continued, the words spilling out now. But looking back, I wonder if I ever really knew him at all. Or if I simply accepted what was expected, a suitable match with a man from the right family. And now? What do you expect? The question hung between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. Before Rosalie could answer, a commotion erupted outside, shouting, followed by the sound of breaking glass. Quinn was on his feet immediately. Stay here, he instructed, moving toward the door. Naturally, Rosalie followed. Outside, two men were squared off in the street, fists raised. A small crowd had gathered to watch. That's Ted Rollins, Quinn explained quietly, and Frank Dixon, been feuding over water rights for months. As they watched, the shorter man Dixon lunged forward, landing a solid punch that sent Rollins staggering back into a hitching post. Rollins recovered quickly, charging forward with a roar of rage. Quinn sighed. Excuse me a moment. Before Rosalie could protest, he strode into the fray, positioning himself between the two combatants. Enough, he called out, his voice carrying authority. This isn't solving anything. Stay out of it, Prescott, Rollins growled. This ain't your fight. It becomes my fight when you're tearing up the town my friends and neighbors built, Quinn replied evenly. Now back down, both of you. Sheriff's on his way, and he'll have you both in jail for disturbing the peace. Dixon spat on the ground. He's damming up the creek that runs through both our properties. My cattle need that water. I've got water rights, Rollins countered. Paid good money for 'em. Then we'll sort it out legally, Quinn said firmly. Mayor Thompson's in his office. You can both state your case there. For a tense moment, it seemed the men might ignore Quinn's intervention. Then Rollins lowered his fists with a grunt. Fine, but if the mayor don't settle this, I will. As the crowd dispersed, Quinn made his way back to Rosalie's side. Sorry about that. Saturday excitement in Sweetwater Springs. You handled that very diplomatically, Rosalie observed, impressed despite herself. Quinn shrugged. Just common sense. Fighting only feels good until someone pulls a gun. Then, it's tragedy. A new respect for Quinn Prescott took root in Rosalie's heart. He wasn't just physically capable. He possessed a wisdom that came from lived experience rather than formal education. The afternoon passed pleasantly as they completed their errands and browsed the town's limited offerings. As promised, a fiddler set up outside the Silver Spur as evening approached, and townspeople began to gather. Care to stay for a while? Quinn asked. The music's starting soon. Rosalie hesitated, aware that remaining in town after dark with Quinn would certainly fuel gossip. Yet she found she didn't care as much as she should. I'd like that, she decided, though I don't know the dances. Quinn grinned. I'm a fair teacher, or so I've been told. The wooden platform outside the saloon filled quickly as couples gathered for the dancing. The fiddler was joined by a man with a harmonica and another with a guitar. The music they produced was lively and infectious, nothing like the orchestral pieces Rosalie was accustomed to, but appealing in its uninhibited joy. Quinn led her to the edge of the platform. Just follow my lead, he said, taking her hand in his and placing his other hand lightly at her waist. The first dance was a simple two-step that Rosalie mastered quickly. The second was more complex, involving changes of partners and intricate patterns. She found herself laughing as she made mistakes, caught up in the spirit of the gathering. You're a natural, Quinn told her as they paused for a glass of lemonade provided by the saloon owner's wife. Hardly, Rosalie replied, flushed with exertion and pleasure. But it's surprisingly enjoyable. As the evening progressed, the tempo of the music slowed. Quinn drew her closer for a waltz, his hand warm and steady at her back. Rosalie was acutely conscious of his physical presence, the clean scent of his soap, the gentle pressure of his fingers against hers, the way he moved with confident grace despite his imposing size. "Thank you for today," she said softly as they circled the floor. "I've enjoyed myself more than I expected to." "High praise indeed," Quinn teased, though I suspect that has more to do with the books than my company. "The books are a welcome diversion," Rosalie admitted, "but the company has been enlightening." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Quinn's gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. Rosalie felt her breath catch, suddenly aware of possibilities she had never considered. The moment was broken by the appearance of Mayor Thompson at Quinn's elbow. "Prescott, might I have a word?" Reluctantly, Quinn stepped back from Rosalie. "Of course. Will you excuse me for a moment, Miss Greenwood?" Rosalie nodded, watching as the two men moved away for a private conversation. Whatever the mayor was saying appeared serious. Quinn's expression grew increasingly grave as he listened. When he returned to her side, his demeanor had changed. "I apologize, but we should head back to the ranch. There's been trouble." "What kind of trouble?" Rosalie asked as they made their way quickly to the buggy. Quinn helped her up before replying, his voice pitched low. "Rustlers hit the Peterson place last night, took 30 head and shot the night watchman." "How dreadful!" Rosalie exclaimed. "Is the man—" "He'll live," Quinn said grimly. "But the rustlers are growing bolder. Mayor thinks they might target the Double G next." "Why?" "We've got the best stock in the county, and with us short-handed since Jackson left," he shook his head, "it makes us vulnerable." The drive back to the ranch was conducted in tense silence, the easy camaraderie of the day overshadowed by concern. When they arrived, Quinn immediately called the remaining hands together for a meeting in the bunkhouse while Rosalie went to inform Martha of the situation. "Lord have mercy," Martha murmured when Rosalie explained. "Poor Jim Peterson, his wife's expecting their third child." "Quinn seems very concerned," Rosalie said, accepting a cup of coffee from the older woman. "As he should be," Martha replied. "Rustlers aren't just thieves, they're desperate men, dangerous. Quinn's father was killed by rustlers, you know." Rosalie hadn't known. He mentioned his father died when he was 15, but not how. Martha nodded sadly. "Shot in the back while defending the herd. Quinn found him. That's why he takes rustling so seriously, why he's so set on doing things the right way, legally. He knows the cost of frontier justice." This new insight into Quinn's character deepened Rosalie's respect for him. She thought of how he'd intervened in the town fight, choosing words over violence despite his obvious physical advantage. Quinn joined them shortly, his expression grim but determined. "I've set up a rotating watch schedule," he informed them. "The boys will take shifts. I'd appreciate it if you both stayed close to the house for the next few days." "Surely they wouldn't attack in daylight?" Rosalie asked. "Probably not," Quinn acknowledged, "but I'd rather not take chances. These aren't ordinary rustlers. They're organized, which means they're more dangerous." "What does my father say about this?" Rosalie asked. "Surely he's dealt with similar threats before." A shadow passed over Quinn's face. "Your father isn't always as engaged with the ranch's day-to-day operations as he might be. He tends to leave these matters to the local management." Rosalie frowned. This aligned with what she knew of her father's business approach. He acquired properties as investments, but maintained distance from their operation. But something in Quinn's tone suggested there was more to the story. "Is there something I should know, Quinn?" He hesitated, then gestured toward the study. "Perhaps we should talk privately." Once the door closed behind them, Quinn ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Rosalie had come to recognize as a sign of internal conflict. "Your father purchased the Double G from old man Harrison about 3 years ago," Quinn began. Harrison was retiring, moving to San Antonio to live with his daughter. It was a fair price for good land. Yes, I'm aware of the purchase details, Rosalie confirmed. What you might not know is that the Double G sits on contested territory, Quinn continued. There's a faction led by a man named Victor Blackwell that claims your father's deed isn't valid, that Harrison never had proper title to all the land he sold. Rosalie frowned. If that were true, surely it would have been discovered during the sale. Land records out here aren't as precise as back east, Quinn explained, and Blackwell's claim only surfaced after your father's purchase. He's been pressuring your father to sell the disputed portion, about 5,000 acres, that include the best water source on the property. And my father refused? Quinn nodded. Rightly so. Blackwell's claim is dubious at best, but he's not a man who takes rejection well. You think these rustlers are connected to Blackwell? Rosalie asked, making the connection. I can't prove it, Quinn replied, but the timing is suspicious. Jackson, the foreman who left, was seen meeting with Blackwell in town the day before he quit. Rosalie absorbed this information, anger rising within her. Why didn't my father mention any of this in his letters? I can't speak for Mr. Greenwood, Quinn said carefully, but he may have thought the problem was resolved. The local judge ruled in his favor 6 months ago when Blackwell tried to take the matter to court. Yet now the rustling has started, Rosalie mused. It seems Blackwell has decided to apply a different kind of pressure. That would be my assessment, Quinn agreed, though again, I can't prove it. Rosalie straightened her shoulders. Then we shall have to be vigilant. I'll write to my father immediately for instructions. Quinn studied her for a long moment. You're not frightened? Should I be? Rosalie countered. Most women from the East would be packing their trunks about now, Quinn observed. I'm not most women, Rosalie replied, and Greenwoods don't run from threats. If this Blackwell thinks he can intimidate my family into selling what is rightfully ours, he's sorely mistaken. A slow smile spread across Quinn's face. No, Miss Rosalie Greenwood, you certainly are not most women. The coming days brought heightened tension to the Double G. Quinn implemented strict security measures. All cattle were moved closer to the ranch house, extra hands were hired for night watch duty, and no one traveled alone beyond the immediate vicinity of the main buildings. Rosalie threw herself into the management of the ranch with renewed determination. She pored over maps of the property, studying the boundaries and water sources that made the disputed section so valuable. She reviewed the legal documents pertaining to the purchase, finding nothing that would substantiate Blackwell's claim. Her father's reply to her urgent letter was characteristically brief and businesslike. He confirmed Quinn's account of the situation and instructed her to maintain possession at all reasonable costs. He added that he would send legal representation if necessary, but believed the local authorities would uphold his rightful claim. Not exactly charging to the rescue, is he? Quinn remarked when she shared the letter's contents. My father believes in self-reliance, Rosalie replied, though she couldn't deny a twinge of disappointment. And he has confidence in our ability to handle the situation. Our ability? Quinn raised an eyebrow. Well, yours primarily, Rosalie admitted, but I intend to be useful as well. Quinn smiled at that. You already are. The men respect you, you know. They weren't sure what to make of a Boston lady at first, but you've proven yourself willing to learn and adapt. Rosalie felt a flush of pleasure at his words. I've had a good teacher. Their eyes met, and that now familiar current of awareness passed between them. In the days since their trip to town, they had maintained a careful professional relationship, the heightened danger providing a convenient reason to avoid addressing the growing attraction between them. The first test of the ranch's security came 3 nights later. Rosalie was awakened just after midnight by the sound of gunfire in the distance. She hurriedly pulled on a robe over her nightdress and rushed to the window, where she could see lanterns moving rapidly near the east pasture. A knock at her door preceded Martha's worried face. Miss Rosalie, Quinn says to stay inside with the doors locked. There's trouble. Is anyone hurt? Rosalie asked, already reaching for her clothes. Not that I know of, Martha replied. But you can't go out there, it's too dangerous. Rosalie hesitated, torn between prudence and a desire to help. In the end, prudence won. She would only be a liability in an unfamiliar nighttime confrontation. Please let me know as soon as you hear anything. Dawn was breaking when Quinn finally returned to the house, his face grim with exhaustion. A smudge of dirt streaked one cheek, and his shirt was torn at the shoulder. "Quinn!" Rosalie exclaimed, rushing to meet him. She'd been pacing the kitchen for hours, unable to rest. "What happened? Is everyone all right?" "We're all fine," he assured her, accepting the cup of coffee Martha pressed into his hands. "They tried to cut the fence and drive off about 50 head, but we were ready for them. Exchanged some gunfire, but they retreated when they realized we were prepared." "Did you recognize any of them?" Rosalie asked. Quinn shook his head. "Too dark, and they wore bandanas over their faces. But they were organized, knew exactly which section of fence to cut, and had the cattle route planned." "Blackwell's men," Rosalie said with certainty. "Most likely," Quinn agreed, "but we still can't prove it." "We need to find evidence linking him to the rustlers," Rosalie decided. "Something that would stand up in court." Quinn looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "That's easier said than done. And dangerous. Blackwell has connections in the territory, friends in positions of influence." "Every man has weaknesses," Rosalie countered. "We simply need to discover Blackwell's." Over the next week, the Double G remained on high alert, but no further rustling attempts were made. Rosalie continued to gather information about Victor Blackwell, piecing together a picture of a man whose ambition exceeded his scruples. A wealthy landowner who had arrived in the territory just 5 years earlier, Blackwell had amassed significant holdings through means that weren't always transparent. He maintained a veneer of respectability, contributing to local causes and attending church regularly, but whispers about his business practices persisted. Rosalie's opportunity to observe the man firsthand came unexpectedly. A community gathering was announced to raise funds for the new schoolhouse, and attendance was expected from all prominent local families. "We should go," Rosalie told Quinn when the invitation arrived. "It would look suspicious if the Double G wasn't represented." "It's a risk," Quinn cautioned. "Blackwell will certainly be there." "Precisely," Rosalie replied. "I want to see this man for myself." Quinn studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. "All right. But you stay close to me the entire time." The gathering was held in the town hall, a simple but spacious building decorated with bunting and wildflowers for the occasion. Rosalie wore her newest dress, a deep blue cotton with modest lace trim that Martha had helped alter to fit properly. She had twisted her hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck, securing it with pins borrowed from Martha. Quinn, dressed in his best clothes, offered his arm as they entered. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Every man here will envy me." Rosalie felt a flutter of pleasure at his words. "Let's hope Blackwell is among them. Perhaps he'll be more inclined to speak openly if he's distracted." "Just be careful," Quinn warned. "The man's dangerous, even in polite company." It wasn't difficult to identify Victor Blackwell. He was the center of attention in a group near the refreshment table, a tall, well-dressed man in his 40s with silver threading through his dark hair and an air of easy authority. His laugh carried across the room as he responded to something one of his companions said. "That's him," Quinn confirmed, nodding discreetly in Blackwell's direction. "With Sheriff Daniels and Judge Parker." "Cultivating the local authorities," Rosalie observed. "Shrewd." "And effective," Quinn added. "The sheriff tends to look the other way when complaints are filed against Blackwell's operations." They circulated through the gathering, exchanging pleasantries with townspeople Rosalie had met during her previous visit. She was surprised by the warmth of her reception. It seemed her willingness to adapt to local ways had earned her a measure of respect. Eventually, as she'd anticipated, Blackwell made his way to their location. His smile was practiced, his manner cordial, but his eyes were cold and assessing as they moved from Quinn to Rosalie. "Miss Greenwood, I presume," he said, extending his hand. "Victor Blackwell. I've been hoping to make your acquaintance." Rosalie offered her hand with practiced poise. Mr. Blackwell. Your name has come up in conversation. All good things, I hope? His smile didn't reach his eyes. Interesting things, Rosalie replied. I understand you have an unusual interpretation of land rights in the territory. Blackwell's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Directness, how refreshing. Most Eastern ladies prefer to dance around difficult subjects. I find honesty saves time, Rosalie said, and I understand you've been taking quite an interest in my father's property. Your father purchased land that includes a section rightfully belonging to me, Blackwell stated smoothly. A simple misunderstanding that could be rectified with a fair transaction. The courts seem to disagree with your assessment, Rosalie countered. Courts can reconsider when new evidence emerges. Blackwell's tone remained pleasant, but the threat was unmistakable. I admire your loyalty to your father's interests, Miss Greenwood, but you're new to our territory. There are complexities to land ownership here that Eastern lawyers don't always grasp. Is that why you've resorted to rustling cattle instead of legal channels? The words left Rosalie's mouth before she could reconsider their wisdom. Quinn tensed beside her, but Blackwell merely chuckled. A serious accusation, Miss Greenwood. I'd be careful about making such claims without evidence. Honest ranchers have nothing to fear from careful observation, Rosalie replied. Those with something to hide, however. You have spirit, Blackwell acknowledged. I respect that, but spirit alone won't protect your interests. He glanced at Quinn. Nor will hiring capable hands. Is that a threat, Blackwell? Quinn asked quietly. Merely an observation, Prescott. Blackwell turned back to Rosalie. My offer to purchase the disputed section stands. I suggest you advise your father to accept it before the situation becomes untenable. With a slight bow, he moved away, rejoining his circle of influential friends. That was risky, Quinn said in a low voice, accusing him directly. I wanted to gauge his reaction, Rosalie explained. Did you notice how he didn't explicitly deny the rustling accusation? He deflected. Quinn nodded slowly. You're right, and he's growing impatient. That reference to the situation becoming untenable. He's planning something, Rosalie concluded. We need to be prepared. They remained at the gathering long enough to avoid appearing rattled by the encounter, but both were relieved when they could finally take their leave. The night air was cool as they drove back to the ranch, the moon providing ample light for the journey. You handled yourself well tonight, Quinn said after several minutes of thoughtful silence. Not many would stand their ground against a man like Blackwell. He's a bully, Rosalie replied, and bullies rely on intimidation. The moment you show fear, you've lost. Quinn glanced at her with new appreciation. You're quite remarkable, Rosalie Greenwood. The way he said her name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the night air. I've had to develop a certain resilience, she said. Boston society can be its own kind of battlefield. Different weapons, same strategies, Quinn suggested. Precisely, Rosalie smiled, though I admit the stakes feel higher here. Quinn's expression grew serious. They are. Blackwell won't stop with threats. The rustling attempt was just the beginning. What do you think he'll try next? Hard to say, Quinn replied, but we should increase security further. I'll arrange for more men. Rosalie considered this. That will be expensive. Less expensive than losing the herd, Quinn pointed out. True. Rosalie hesitated, then added, There's another approach we might consider. I'm listening. We set a trap, Rosalie suggested. Make Blackwell believe we've left a section of the herd vulnerable. But we'll be waiting. Quinn frowned. That's dangerous, Rosalie. So is allowing Blackwell to dictate the terms of this conflict, she countered. If we can catch his men in the act with witnesses who can identify them, we'd have the evidence we need. Quinn was quiet for a long moment, weighing her suggestion. It might work, he acknowledged finally, but we'd need to plan carefully, and you would need to stay well away from any confrontation. Of course, Rosalie agreed, though, in truth, she had no intention of remaining a passive observer if her ranch was threatened. The next few days were devoted to preparations. Quinn selected a pasture that appeared isolated, but offered good visibility and multiple approach routes for the defenders. Word was quietly spread in town that the Double G had been forced to reduce night patrols due to the expense information that would surely reach Blackwell's ears. Meanwhile, Rosalie found herself increasingly drawn to Quinn. His intelligence, integrity, and quiet strength appealed to her in ways Charles Winthrop's polished charm never had. She caught herself watching him as he worked, admiring the grace with which he moved despite his size, the gentle way he handled animals, the respect he showed to every person regardless of their station. For his part, Quinn made no attempt to hide his growing feelings for her. His gaze lingered when he thought she wasn't looking, and he found reasons to be near her throughout the day. They had fallen into the habit of sharing the evening meal in the study, discussing ranch business that inevitably gave way to more personal conversations. "Tell me about your family," Rosalie asked one such evening as they sat before the small fireplace. Outside, a rare summer storm lashed the windows with rain. Quinn leaned back in his chair, a nostalgic smile touching his lips. "My mother was the strongest person I've ever known. Raised 4 children mostly on her own. My father was often away working cattle drives. After he died, she took in laundry, sewed for the town ladies, did whatever was necessary to keep us fed." "Where is she now?" "She passed 3 years ago," Quinn replied, a shadow crossing his face. "Consumption. My sisters are all married now too in San Antonio, one in Dallas. Good men, all 3 of their husbands. I make sure to visit when I can." "You miss them," Rosalie observed. "Every day," Quinn admitted. "Family's everything out here. The land is harsh. You need people you can count on." "I wish I could say the same of my family," Rosalie said quietly. "My parents love me in their way, but we've never been close. My father values achievement above all else, and my mother is devoted to maintaining social appearances." "And yet you're here, defending their interests," Quinn pointed out. "My father's business interests," Rosalie corrected, "though I find I've developed my own attachment to the Double G." "Just to the ranch?" Quinn asked, his gaze intent. Rosalie felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Not only to the ranch," she admitted softly. The confession hung between them, charged with possibility. Quinn set aside his coffee cup and moved to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "Rosalie," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "I know I'm not the kind of man your parents would choose for you. I don't have wealth or social position, but I swear to you, if you gave me the chance, I would spend every day trying to make you happy." Rosalie's heart pounded in her chest. "Quinn, you don't have to answer now," he continued. "I know this is sudden, but with everything that's happening, I couldn't bear the thought of something going wrong tomorrow without having told you how I feel." Impulsively, Rosalie leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was brief, sweet, and entirely improper, and she didn't care in the slightest. "I don't need time," she whispered as she drew back. "These past weeks have shown me what truly matters. You've shown me." Quinn's eyes, bright with emotion, searched her face. "Are you certain? Your life here would be so different from everything you've known." "I've never been more certain of anything," Rosalie replied. "My life in Boston was comfortable but empty. Here, I've found purpose. And you." He kissed her then, a deeper kiss that sent warmth flooding through her. His hands cradled her face as though she were something infinitely precious, and Rosalie felt tears prick her eyes at the tenderness of his touch. When they finally parted, both breathless, Quinn pressed his forehead to hers. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together." "Together," Rosalie agreed. Dawn broke clear and bright, the previous night's storm having washed the world clean. Rosalie rose early, dressing with care in the riding clothes that had become her daily attire. As she pinned her hair in a practical knot, she reflected on how much had changed in the weeks since her arrival. The woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in impractical silk seemed a stranger now. Quinn was already in the kitchen when she descended, reviewing plans with the ranch hands who would participate in the operation. He looked up as she entered, his face softening into a smile that made her heart skip. "Everything's set," he informed her. "The men know their positions. We've got 12 hands, total 4 to guard the main herd, 8 positioned around the vulnerable section." "And the sheriff?" Rosalie asked. She had insisted they notify the law, despite Quinn's reservations about Sheriff Daniels' loyalties. "I sent Billy into town at first light," Quinn replied. "The sheriff promised to be on standby, though I don't know if we can count on him." Rosalie nodded. She had expected as much. "And my role?" Quinn's expression grew serious. "You stay here with Martha. No arguments, Rosalie. If Blackwell's men come in force, it could get dangerous quickly." Though she had anticipated this instruction, Rosalie had no intention of remaining behind while others defended her property. But she merely nodded, knowing that any protest would only cause Quinn to take additional precautions to ensure her compliance. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Quinn and most of the hands departed after breakfast, taking up their hidden positions near the supposedly vulnerable herd. Rosalie occupied herself with routine tasks, all the while making mental preparations for her own plan. As dusk approached, she changed into dark clothing and braided her hair securely. She had borrowed a small revolver from Quinn's desk drawer days earlier, practicing with it when she could steal away unobserved. Now she tucked it into the pocket of her riding skirt, along with extra ammunition. "Martha," she called, descending to the kitchen where the older woman was preparing a simple supper. "I have a headache and think I'll retire early. Would you mind terribly if I skipped the evening meal?" Martha gave her a knowing look. "Planning to slip out after dark, aren't you?" Rosalie sighed. She should have known better than to attempt deception with the perceptive housekeeper. "I can't stay here while they put themselves at risk for my family's property." "Quinn will have my hide if he finds out I let you go," Martha said. "Then don't tell him you knew," Rosalie suggested. "I'll be careful, Martha." "I promise." The older woman studied her for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. "Take the bay mare, she's sure-footed in the dark. And Rosalie, if there's shooting, you stay well back, you hear?" "I hear," Rosalie assured her, grateful for the unexpected alliance. "Thank you." Full darkness had fallen by the time Rosalie slipped from the house and made her way to the stables. The bay mare, as though sensing the need for stealth, remained quiet, as Rosalie saddled her and led her away from the buildings before mounting. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast Texas sky like diamonds on black velvet. Rosalie oriented herself using the landmarks Quinn had taught her and set off toward the pasture where the trap was laid. She approached cautiously, tying the mare to a tree well back from the potential confrontation site and proceeding on foot. The sound of cattle, restless in the darkness, guided her toward the location. As she drew nearer, she could make out the shapes of men positioned at intervals around the perimeter. Quinn's men, waiting. Rosalie found a vantage point behind a rocky outcropping that offered both concealment and a clear view of the pasture. From here, she could observe without being easily spotted, and she could retreat quickly if necessary. Time passed slowly. An hour. 2. The moon rose, casting silver light across the landscape. Rosalie began to wonder if Blackwell's men would come at all. Perhaps they had somehow detected the trap. Then she heard the soft nicker of horses approaching from the west, moving with deliberate stealth. Shadows detached themselves from the deeper darkness of the tree line, 5 riders, moving with practiced coordination toward the sleeping cattle. Rosalie tensed, her hand moving to the revolver in her pocket. The rustlers spread out, preparing to encircle the small herd. One man dismounted, moving toward the makeshift fence with wire cutters visible in his hand. The night exploded into action. Quinn's voice rang out, "Double G, hold it right there!" and lanterns flared to life, illuminating the scene. The ranch hands emerged from their hiding places, rifles raised. For a heartbeat, everyone froze. Then one of the rustlers shouted, "It's a trap!" and chaos erupted. Gunshots shattered the night. Rosalie saw one of the rustlers fall from his horse, while another wheeled his mount and charged directly toward Quinn's position. Without thinking, she rose from her concealment, drawing the revolver. "Quinn, behind you!" she shouted. Quinn spun just in time to dodge the charging horse, firing a shot that went wide. The rustler circled back, pistol raised, but before he could fire, Rosalie squeezed the trigger of her own weapon. The shot went high, but the sound was enough to startle the rustler's horse, causing it to rear. The man tumbled from the saddle, landing hard. "Rosalie!" Quinn's voice carried above the commotion, a mixture of anger and fear. "Get down!" She ducked back behind the rocks as more shots were exchanged. Through gaps in her cover, she could see that 3 of the rustlers were down, 1 wounded, 2 apparently surrendering. The other 2 had retreated to the tree line, where they continued to fire sporadically. Then, a new voice cut through the night, familiar, cultured, and chilling. "Enough! Cease fire!" Victor Blackwell rode into the clearing, flanked by 2 armed men. Unlike the rustlers, he made no attempt to conceal his identity. "Prescott," he called, "let's discuss this like civilized men." Quinn stepped forward, rifle still raised. "There's nothing to discuss, Blackwell. We caught your men red-handed. The sheriff's on his way." Blackwell chuckled. "The sheriff won't be joining us tonight. He's been unavoidably detained." "You're outnumbered," Quinn pointed out. "Your men are captured or fled. Surrender now, and we'll let the law handle this." "Am I outnumbered?" Blackwell made a subtle gesture, and suddenly more riders emerged from the shadows, at least 10 men, all armed. "I think not." Rosalie's heart sank. They had anticipated resistance, but not a small army. Quinn and his men were now the ones outnumbered. "This land will be mine one way or another, Prescott," Blackwell continued. "I've been patient, but my patience has its limits. Miss Greenwood refuses to see reason. Perhaps you can persuade her, assuming you survive the night. If you harm any of my men, the territorial governor will hear of it," Quinn warned. "You'll hang." "Who said anything about harming?" Blackwell replied smoothly. "I'm simply here to reclaim cattle that are rightfully mine cattle grazing on my land." "This land belongs to the Greenwoods," Quinn stated firmly, "and you know it." "A technicality soon to be rectified," Blackwell said. "Now, I suggest you and your men drop your weapons. No need for bloodshed." Rosalie could see Quinn weighing their options, clearly reluctant to surrender but unwilling to risk his men in a hopeless fight. Before he could respond, Rosalie made her decision. She stood, stepping out from behind the rocks, revolver held steady at her side. "Mr. Blackwell," she called, her voice carrying clearly in the night air. "I believe this confrontation has gone far enough." All eyes turned toward her. Quinn's expression shifted from shock to fury to fear in rapid succession. "Rosalie, get back!" he shouted. Blackwell's surprise gave way to amusement. "Miss Greenwood, how unexpected, and brave, or perhaps foolish." "Neither," Rosalie replied, walking steadily toward the center of the standoff. "Merely practical. You want this land. I represent the owners. Let's resolve this directly." "Rosalie, no," Quinn began, moving toward her. "Stay where you are." "Quinn," she instructed, her eyes never leaving Blackwell. "Mr. Blackwell and I are going to have a civilized conversation." Blackwell studied her with new interest. "Very well, Miss Greenwood. I'm listening." "You claim to have evidence that this land rightfully belongs to you," Rosalie said. "I'd like to see it." "My attorneys have the documents," Blackwell replied smoothly. "How convenient." Rosalie's tone made it clear she didn't believe him. "In the absence of such evidence, we have only your word against my father's legal deed, and now we have your men caught attempting to steal our cattle." "A misunderstanding," Blackwell insisted. "My men believed these particular cattle had strayed onto my adjacent property." "With wire cutters and in the dead of night?" Rosalie raised an eyebrow. "A rather elaborate response to strays." Murmurs ran through the assembled men, and Rosalie sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Blackwell's smooth facade cracked slightly. "What do you propose, Miss Greenwood?" he asked, his tone hardening. "I won't leave empty-handed tonight." "And I won't surrender what rightfully belongs to my family," Rosalie countered. She took a calculated risk. "However, I am authorized to discuss a legitimate business arrangement not made under duress or threat of violence." Blackwell's eyes narrowed. "Go on." "Meet me tomorrow at the bank in Sweetwater Springs. Bring your supposed evidence and your attorney. I'll bring mine. We'll review all documents thoroughly and, if necessary, contact the Territorial Land Office for clarification. And if I refuse, Rosalie smiled thinly, then I'll be forced to conclude you have no legitimate claim, merely criminal intent, in which case I've taken precautions. She withdrew an envelope from her pocket. This contains details of your operations, Mr. Blackwell, including witness statements regarding your connection to the rustling. I've arranged for copies to be sent to the territorial governor and the federal marshal if anything happens to me or any Double G employee. It was a bluff. The envelope contained nothing but blank paper, but Rosalie delivered the lie with absolute conviction. A tense silence followed. Blackwell's men shifted uncomfortably, looking to their employer for direction. Quinn and his ranch hands maintained their positions, weapons still at the ready. Finally, Blackwell laughed a short, harsh sound. "You are full of surprises, Miss Greenwood." "Very well. A meeting at the bank tomorrow, 10 o'clock. But I warn you, if this is some kind of trap." "It's a business meeting, Mr. Blackwell," Rosalie replied calmly. "Nothing more, nothing less. Now, I suggest you and your men depart. The 3 rustlers we've captured will remain in our custody until the sheriff arrives." For a moment, Rosalie thought Blackwell might refuse. Then he nodded curtly. 10 o'clock. Don't be late." He turned his horse, gesturing for his men to follow. "And Prescott, you found yourself quite a woman there. I almost envy you." They watched in tense silence as Blackwell and his men rode away, taking the 2 rustlers who had retreated to the tree line with them, but leaving behind the 3 who had been captured. The moment they were out of sight, Quinn strode to Rosalie, his expression a storm of emotions. "What were you thinking? He could have killed you." "Not with so many witnesses," Rosalie replied. "Blackwell values his reputation too much for that." "You don't know that." Quinn's voice shook with residual fear. "And what meeting? What attorney? What evidence?" "I needed to buy us time," Rosalie explained, "and get him to leave peacefully tonight." "So all of that was a bluff?" Quinn ran a hand through his hair in exasperation. "Rosalie, when I told you to stay at the ranch, it wasn't a suggestion." "I know," she acknowledged, "and I'm sorry for disobeying you, but I couldn't stay behind while you risked your life for my family's property." Quinn's anger seemed to deflate. He pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Don't ever scare me like that again." Rosalie returned the embrace, feeling the rapid beat of his heart against her cheek. "I can't promise that," she said honestly, "but I will promise to be careful." He drew back, studying her face in the lantern light. "You're the most infuriating, courageous woman I've ever known." "Thank you," she replied with a small smile. "Now, we have until 10 tomorrow morning to develop an actual plan." Dawn found them gathered around the kitchen table. Quinn, Rosalie, Martha, and Quinn's most trusted hands. The captured rustlers were secured in an empty stall in the barn, guarded by 2 men. They had been surprisingly forthcoming once they realized Blackwell had abandoned them, confirming that they had been hired specifically to harass the Double G until Greenwood was forced to sell. "We need proof that Blackwell is behind this," Quinn said, examining the map of the territory spread before them. "The rustler's word won't be enough, especially with Sheriff Daniels in Blackwell's pocket." "What about Judge Parker?" Rosalie suggested. "I noticed him speaking with Blackwell at the social, but he seemed uncomfortable. Perhaps he's not entirely corrupted?" "Parker's straight," one of the hands confirmed. "Old-fashioned sense of justice. If we brought solid evidence to him, he'd act on it regardless of who was involved." "Then that's our target," Rosalie decided. "We need to get to Parker with evidence before our meeting with Blackwell." "And what evidence do we have?" Quinn asked. 3 rustlers who will probably change their story as soon as Blackwell's lawyer gets to them." Rosalie tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. "What if we had something in Blackwell's own hand, something that proves he knew the land claim was fraudulent?" "That would do it," Quinn agreed. "But how do we get that?" "I have an idea," Rosalie said slowly, "but you're not going to like it." Quinn's expression confirmed her prediction as she outlined her plan. It was risky and depended on several assumptions about Blackwell's character, but it was the best option they had. "Absolutely not," Quinn said when she finished. It's too dangerous. Do you have a better suggestion? Rosalie challenged. We have hours, not days, to resolve this. The debate continued, but in the end, Quinn reluctantly agreed with modifications to increase Rosalie's safety. By mid-morning, they were ready. Rosalie entered the Sweetwater Springs bank at precisely 10 o'clock, dressed in her finest Boston attire, a signal to Blackwell that she was taking the meeting seriously. Quinn accompanied her, along with 2 ranch hands positioned as guards. Blackwell was already present, seated at a table in the bank manager's private office, with a distinguished-looking man who could only be his attorney. Paperwork was arranged neatly before them. Miss Greenwood, Blackwell greeted her with a thin smile. Right on time. This is Mr. Hargrove, my legal counsel. Mr. Blackwell, Mr. Hargrove. Rosalie nodded politely. This is Quinn Prescott, the Double G's foreman and my personal representative. Blackwell's eyebrow rose at the term personal, but he made no comment. Shall we begin? Mr. Hargrove has prepared a summary of my claim to the disputed section. Before we examine your documentation, I would like to clarify something, Rosalie said, seating herself across from Blackwell. Last night you employed armed men to steal cattle from my property and threatened my employees. Why should I consider any proposal from you in good faith? As I explained, a misunderstanding? Blackwell replied smoothly. My men were overzealous in reclaiming what they believed to be my property. A convenient explanation, Rosalie observed, but one that strains credibility. Blackwell's smile tightened. Miss Greenwood, I agreed to this meeting to resolve our differences legally. If you prefer other methods, not at all, Rosalie assured him. I merely want to establish the context for our negotiations. She removed a document from her own portfolio. I've taken the liberty of drafting a potential resolution. Blackwell accepted the paper, reading it with growing disbelief. This is preposterous. You're proposing I relinquish all claims to the disputed land in exchange for access to the water source? Shared access, Rosalie clarified. My research indicates that your primary interest in the property is the creek that runs through it. Your adjacent ranch lacks sufficient water for expansion. My claim is to the land itself, Blackwell insisted. The water rights are merely one component. Then produce your evidence, Rosalie challenged. Show me the document that supersedes my father's legal deed. Hargrove cleared his throat. We have testimony from the previous owner, James Harrison, that he was aware the southeastern boundary was in dispute when he sold to Mr. Greenwood. Hearsay, Quinn interjected. Harrison is in San Antonio and, according to his last letter, has no recollection of any such statement. Blackwell's expression darkened. Are you calling me a liar, Prescott? I'm saying your evidence is insufficient, Quinn replied evenly. Rosalie placed a calming hand on Quinn's arm. Perhaps there's another approach. She turned to Blackwell. You're a businessman, Mr. Blackwell. So is my father. Surely we can reach an arrangement that benefits both parties without resorting to legal battles or worse. I'm listening, Blackwell said cautiously. Water rights, Rosalie proposed. Guaranteed access to the creek for your cattle, formalized in a legal agreement. In exchange, you withdraw all claims to the land itself. And why would I accept that when I believe the land is rightfully mine? Blackwell countered. Rosalie smiled. Because litigation is expensive and time-consuming. Because even if you somehow prevailed in territorial court, my father would appeal to federal authorities. Because your methods thus far suggest you're more interested in results than principles. A tense silence followed her assessment. Hargrove leaned over to whisper something in Blackwell's ear, but the rancher waved him off. You're direct, Miss Greenwood. I'll grant you that. Blackwell studied her with newfound respect. What assurance do I have that this water access would be permanent and uncontested? A binding legal agreement, filed with both the territorial and federal land offices, Rosalie replied promptly. With specific provisions for dispute resolution that don't involve armed confrontations in the night. The subtle reminder of his tactics caused Blackwell's jaw to tighten, but he maintained his composure. I'll need time to consider this proposal. Of course, Rosalie agreed. However, there is one more matter to address. She withdrew another document from her portfolio. This is a statement from the 3 men captured last night, detailing their employment by you specifically to harass the Double G. Coerced testimony, Blackwell dismissed. Perhaps, Rosalie acknowledged, but combined with financial records showing payments from your accounts to these individuals, it becomes more compelling. This was another bluff. They had no such financial records, but Rosalie had gambled that Blackwell, like many men engaged in illegal activities, would be concerned about what evidence might exist. She pressed her advantage. Judge Parker has already expressed interest in reviewing these materials. I'm meeting with him this afternoon. Blackwell's expression remained neutral, but Rosalie caught the brief flicker of concern in his eyes. What exactly are you proposing, Miss Greenwood? A comprehensive agreement, Rosalie replied. You receive the water rights you need. We retain full ownership of our land. All hostilities cease immediately and permanently. And these documents regarding your extra-legal activities never reached Judge Parker's desk. The tension in the room was palpable as Blackwell considered her offer. Hargrove whispered urgently in his ear, but Blackwell silenced him with a gesture. You drive a hard bargain for a newcomer to the territory, Blackwell said finally. I'm curious, what would your father say about this arrangement? My father authorized me to resolve the situation in the best interests of the Double G, Rosalie replied smoothly. I believe this accomplishes that goal while offering you a valuable concession. After a long moment, Blackwell nodded. Draw up the agreement, Miss Greenwood. I'll have Hargrove review it. But understand this, if I find any attempt to renege or manipulate the terms after signing, our current disagreement will seem trivial by comparison. I would expect nothing less, Rosalie replied, maintaining her composure despite the implicit threat. Shall we meet again tomorrow to finalize the details? Agreement reached, they concluded the meeting with formal handshakes. Only when they were safely outside the bank did Rosalie allow her knees to buckle slightly, accepting Quinn's supportive arm. You were magnificent, he murmured as they walked toward their waiting horses, but I aged 10 years in there. It worked, Rosalie said, relief evident in her voice. I wasn't certain it would. You outbluffed one of the most dangerous men in the territory, Quinn marveled. Reminded me of a poker player I once saw in Dodge City, calm as still water while betting everything on a pair of deuces. I had more than deuces, Rosalie protested. I had you. Quinn's expression softened as he helped her mount. Always, Rosalie. You'll always have me. The formal agreement was signed the following day, with Judge Parker himself witnessing the document. Blackwell was coldly correct throughout the proceedings, his manner suggesting a man who recognized defeat but was already planning his next venture. Rosalie had no illusions that he had reformed, but she believed he would honor this particular agreement, if only to protect his reputation and avoid the scrutiny that a continued dispute might bring. With the immediate threat resolved, life at the Double G settled into a more peaceful rhythm. Rosalie wrote a detailed account of events to her father, including her assessment that the ranch was now secure and operating efficiently. She also mentioned, almost as an afterthought, her growing attachment to Quinn Prescott and her desire to remain in Texas indefinitely. Her father's reply arrived 3 weeks later, a surprisingly lengthy letter that began with praise for her handling of the Blackwell situation and ended with a startling revelation. I had hoped you might find more at the Double G than a business education. Your mother thought me mad for sending you to such a wilderness, but I remembered how you chafed at Boston's restrictions even as a child. The right challenges bring out our true character, Rosie. It sounds as though you found both your challenges and your match in Mr. Prescott. Your mother and I look forward to meeting him when we visit next spring. He planned this, Rosalie said incredulously, showing the letter to Quinn as they sat on the ranch house porch watching the sunset. He sent me here hoping I would... What? Fall in love with ranch life? With you? Quinn chuckled. Your father sounds like a shrewd judge of potential, both in land and in people. But how could he have known? Rosalie wondered. He couldn't, Quinn replied, but he created the opportunity. The rest happened on its own. Rosalie leaned against Quinn's shoulder, contemplating this new understanding of her father. I should be angry that he manipulated me. Are you? She considered the question. No, she admitted. I'm grateful. Quinn's arm tightened around her. So am I. The summer faded into autumn, bringing cooler temperatures and preparations for winter. Rosalie fully embraced her role as the ranch's manager, implementing improvements based on both Quinn's practical knowledge and her own business acumen. Together, they made the Double G more efficient and profitable than it had ever been. Their wedding took place on a crisp October day, with the entire town of Sweetwater Springs in attendance. Martha had outdone herself decorating the ranch house and preparing a feast worthy of the occasion. Rosalie wore a simple white dress ordered from San Antonio, with wildflowers in her hair instead of the elaborate veil that would have been expected in Boston. As Quinn slipped a ring onto her finger, a band of gold that had belonged to his mother Rosalie reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had arrived in Texas wounded by betrayal, bound by society's expectations, and wholly unprepared for the life awaiting her. She had found not just love, but purpose and a strength within herself she had never known existed. I, Quinn, take you, Rosalie, to be my wife, he vowed, his voice steady and sure. To share in all that life brings, in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, as long as we both shall live. When Rosalie repeated her own vows, she spoke with absolute certainty. This was where she belonged, not in Boston's drawing rooms, but here on the rugged frontier, beside a man whose hands had taught her what real wealth looked like. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. Rosalie's parents visited as promised, her father immediately taking to ranch life, while her mother struggled to adapt to what she termed primitive conditions. Yet, even Eleanor Greenwood eventually admitted that her daughter had found a happiness that many of Boston's wealthiest debutantes never achieved. The Double G prospered under Rosalie and Quinn's joint management. They added land as opportunities arose, implemented innovative breeding programs that produced hardier stock, and earned a reputation for fair dealing throughout the territory. Their family grew as well. Their first child, a daughter they named Sarah after Quinn's mother, arrived a year after their wedding. A son, Henry, followed 2 years later, and another daughter, Elizabeth, 2 years after that. The children thrived in the freedom of ranch life, developing the same love for the land that their parents shared. On quiet evenings when the day's work was done and the children were asleep, Rosalie and Quinn would often sit on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Texas sky. Sometimes they spoke of the future, their hopes for the children, plans for the ranch. Other times they simply enjoyed the comfortable silence of two people who no longer needed words to communicate their deepest feelings. "Do you ever regret it?" Quinn asked one such evening, nearly 10 years after Rosalie had first arrived at the Double G. "Leaving Boston? All those luxuries? The life you were raised to expect?" Rosalie considered the question, though she had long known the answer. She thought of her calloused hands, now as work-worn as Quinn's, of the simple joys that filled her days, a child's laughter, a new calf's first wobbly steps, the satisfaction of a task well done, of the man beside her whose integrity and strength had never wavered. "Not for a moment," she replied, taking his hand in hers. "I may have been born to wealth, Quinn Prescott, but your hands taught me what real riches are." He smiled at that, bringing her hand to his lips. "And what might those be, Mrs. Prescott?" "Love," Rosalie answered simply. "Purpose. The knowledge that I've built something meaningful with my own 2 hands. Everything that matters can't be bought with money or inherited with a name." Quinn nodded, understanding perfectly. "I love you, Rosalie. More with each passing day." "And I love you," she replied, leaning against his shoulder as the first stars appeared overhead. "This life, our children, this land." They sat in companionable silence, as darkness settled over the Double G. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, as every day did in ranch life. But Rosalie faced the future without fear, secure in the knowledge that whatever came, they would meet it together with strong hands and full hearts, building a legacy of love that no fortune could match.